So my name is Dorit. I'm at Checkpoint 24 years. I manage the R&D and products. And before that, I was in Tel Aviv University. So I associate myself a lot with theoretical research on one hand, but with very pragmatical results on the other hand. So coming into this session, I thought, what could I say that would be interesting? And I thought, if there is such a great AI, why do we still need cyber practitioners? So that was the angle I was trying to take. So I won't start with how great is AI, but I will just say that my main thesis here is that if you want to solve a real-world problem, you need experts from both sides, and I tried to share for the data sciences and AI people what they could learn from the cyber people, and to the cyber people what they could learn from the AI people. And I think that in order actually to leverage AI effectively in cyber, you need both in a very close collaboration. So it's not like two separate things that connect with some vague APIs, but two in a box, really. And I'll try to explain why. So this is the general slide of how every attack looks like. And that's nothing new, but an attack has, the attacker has a motive, he has means, he has an opportunity, and then start the cycle of defenses. And if it wasn't clear, I'm not going to talk about AI for attackers, I'm going to talk about AI for defenders. So the defenders either try to prevent the attack or try to kind of detect, analyze, remediate the attack, and through all this chain, things could be done with AI, and this is kind of the supermarket list on everything that could be done. So we could try to identify who is a bad person, what's a bad motivation. We could try to identify bad means, more like malware, or a social engineering message, let's call it whaling from the terminology before us. You could identify an actual attack either by looking at the stream or by looking at the data after fact. And you can replace the analyst. So if you have some analyst looking at data and seeing if you already penetrated, then you could replace that. And actually, efficiency, you could get all over the place. So for example, you could use AI in order to identify from many signs what would be an interesting target for a research. So let's look at a company like us, and let's look at our research team, and let's assume that we want to make cool research. So we could look at many of the topics we have, and we could look for signs that will make the use of our reversers and researcher more useful, because these people are rare and they are still needed in the world of AI. And we have all kind of other terminologies like predictive analysis and what we could predict, etc. So I'll try to get down to earth with some more concrete examples on how one could leverage the other. So a very good, I think, assessment is that AI is great in identifying behaviors. But even at that, even living at that phase, just understanding something that is bad is not as easy, because there is kind of a complexity of value or a fragility of value where it's unclear what's really good or bad. I'll give 3 examples. One example is a system-level Android application that could do anything on your phone and actually is given in Japan in order to help rescue you in times of earthquake. Another example is SMS that seems like stealing your money, but actually used to buying things in your games. And the last example is even more interesting. There is something called couple tracker that could sound like a spyware, but it's actually an agreement between the couple that they are putting couple tracker, and it's kind of preventing fidelity, whatever you want. Okay, understanding what's good or bad is not that easy. And one of the tools we leverage in these cases is to understand the intent. I'll talk a bit about it later. But for example, you try to understand what the application does, what does it publish that it do, what is the intent of the application. That's a place where NLP could be leveraged. But you have to really combine all the disciplines together in order to understand the problem, the dilemma, the solution. The other challenge, which Michal actually alluded to, is that in cyber and when you are looking at the defense side, you're trying to identify the rare case, where usually AI is trying to identify the common case. You're trying to see if there is a cat sitting here at the audience. It has certain ways of doing it, but we're trying to identify the rare case, and not just the rare case, it's the rare case that tries to disguise itself. So that's putting a bit of a challenge, and I'll show a few things we do in this space in order to identify this rare case. But I think one terminology, if you are to research in this space or to do something in this space, you have to adopt the terminology of false alarms and not false positive. Why is that? So people don't have a tolerance to false positives because it stopped them from doing their business. That's good. So then people start to measure false positives, and maybe they have a very low statistical rate to having a false positive, and it sounds great on the paper. But what happens when the attack is very rare? When the attack is very, very rare, the real alarms are very rare. So now the question is not how is an alarm, a false alarm versus the data that you have. It's how much alarms you will get versus the real alarms that you have. So if you get one alarm to 1 million pieces, if you will have a false positive ratio of getting 10 alarms to 1 million pieces, you will get 10 times more noise than real things. So what's important is not the false positive rate. It's really the false alarm rate. It's how much noise you created versus the real events that are out there. And the more rare the attack is, the harder it is to get. It most conveniently shows itself in kind of a whaling attacks, because it's nice that the probability is very low, but the probability up front of a whaling attack is very low. So if you'd be much more noisy than the attacks themselves, it's a problem. So running quickly, here are some of the things that a data scientist could leverage a cyber person to do. Properly setting the definition, I gave you examples. It's about finding the ground truth. It's much more difficult in some cases. What's real, what's a problem? You can't analyze all the data by hand, because that was where we started off. Again, I'm taking for obvious that we could make everything more efficient. So AI could make everything that we do more efficient, that's granted. Now I'm trying to understand how we actually help the real core stuff. So the other thing that a cyber professional could help do is do labeling, a proper labeling that will help the AI. And one of the things that confuse us in some AI systems is that it's unclear what to take the data from and how the analytics shows versus real world, and then how to compare it to the ground truth. We could add all kind of additional data from threat intelligence, other resources, IOCs, network activities, previous behaviors of these users, entities, common behaviors in the world. We could reverse engineer samples and tag them so that the behavior will be more accurate. We could label a whole cluster to help it get some meaning. We could also extend the analysis. So for example, if we look at a URL in one context, if we add more context to this URL, it will be more fruitful. If we look at the enterprise data, if we will add consumer data, it will be much more rich. So one of the problems we've seen is that there are attacks that are very common, and there will be many variants on it. And some people will actually learn all the variants, and there is zero value, because you actually learn the same value. You may have 100,000 samples, but of the same thing. So the value is very minimal. You have to understand that you need to have different type of things in order to learn an effective methodology that really learns the core of the things. So by this model, we're trying kind of to look at the generations, and obviously the script kiddies are the easiest to catch. Most of what they do is known attacks and are very easy to catch, but then they try to disguise themselves, so they would change the hash, or they would add a packer. So packer by itself is a challenge. Why is packer a challenge? Because many people add a packer that is also used for good purposes. And many AI systems that will try to classify the malware will actually classify the packer. So what value is it in classifying the packer? But then if you go along the chain from script kiddies to professionals, criminals that have more funding, to nation states and government grade, it becomes more complicated. So people will change behavior, people will change the method of evasion, people will invent new methods. So if you want to learn something that will identify a new method, you should have enough samples from the different methods. If you take something where all the methods you learn are exactly the same and they are all just variants of the same thing, it's not very helpful. This is where the cyber professional come to play. One of the things we're trying to do with this is to identify malware DNA. We do this by looking at the content. We have to do it after unpacking. So you have to unpack parts. You should know that it's not hard and not easy to unpack parts because people are resistant to packing, and they're trying to pack themselves in a way that's not unpackable. And so you need to unpack this, then look at code level, and you also need to somehow run it and get behavioral analysis. And then you could start to classify this to families such as known things from script kiddies, something that belongs to a professional group, or something that is a state nation. We also use this then to classify families of distribution, droppers. We could add this to the classification, and we could learn this method and classify them to families. We could look at the behavior on screen, how it looks like, and a lot of additional data that helps us do the threat analysis after fact. But this is not really moving. Very good. Now what could cyber specialists learn from data sciences? There is no reason to invent the wheel. There is a lot of innovation out there. There is great models for NLP. If we want to do NLP for cyber, it's exactly like the same NLP in many senses and any other things, and we could use it to understand whaling, etc. We also borrowed image analytics into malware comparisons. It has some comparison with noise kind of effect. And the third element I mentioned here is Lego. AI is very good at Lego, so you could take parts and build from them a bigger kind of tool that does more. If you are to build such an organization or to participate, I encourage an environment where it's very easy to diversify. One of the advantages and strengths of AI and data is that you could take many, many models, many algorithms, mix them together, see what works, many data sources, mix them together and what works. It's kind of experiment in the lab on an ongoing basis. So do that in a way that you embrace CI/CD and unified data models so you could move from one data type to another. To sum up, I think that one of the challenges in defenses is accurate verdict. Accurate verdict is the only thing that can actually lead to prevention. So that's not excluding the importance of efficiency through AI. That's very valuable and that's always should be done. But if you really want to get a prevention system with AI, you need accurate verdict and you need practical prevention, and that's what we do. Thank you very much.